Let's talk about one of the most unsettling feelings we all face: being ignored or feeling the distance grow between you and someone you care about. It hits you in the chest, doesn't it? That moment when the texts slow down, the calls stop coming, or their presence feels more like a shadow than a connection. It stirs up questions, insecurities, and emotions you didn't even know were lurking inside you. Trust me, I've been there. I've felt the sting of someone pulling away, the ache of silence when all I wanted was a response, and the gnawing doubt that maybe I wasn't enough. But here's the thing. Those moments, as painful as they are, don't have to define you. In fact, they can be the exact thing that transforms you. Let me explain. The way we respond to these situations reveals so much about us. It's in those uncomfortable spaces, the silences, the unspoken words, the unanswered questions, that we're given a choice. Will we let the distance weaken us, or will we use it as a chance to grow? Will we drown in the noise of our own overthinking, or will we find clarity in the stillness? I want to share something I've learned the hard way. Being ignored is not always about you. It's not necessarily a reflection of your worth, your value, or what you bring to the table. People pull away for reasons that often have more to do with their struggles than anything you've done. But when you internalize it, when you let their actions dictate your feelings, you hand over your power. You give them control over your peace of mind. And I know that's not what you want. What if I told you that distance and silence could become your allies? That instead of fearing them, you could embrace them as tools for growth, resilience, and self-discovery. I know it's not easy. When you're in the thick of it, it feels like rejection, like failure. But it's not. It's an invitation to turn inward, to strengthen the relationship you have with yourself, and to redefine what truly matters in your life. There's a lesson hidden in these moments, one that the Stoics understood deeply. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what this is about, reclaiming your power, not letting outside actions, whether it's silence, distance, or rejection, shake your foundation. Because when your strength comes from within, no one can take it from you. So let me ask you this. Are you ready to stop chasing answers from others and start finding them within yourself? Are you ready to turn the pain of being ignored into a path toward resilience, clarity, and unshakable self-worth? If so, let's walk this road together. Because trust me, what's on the other side of this is worth every moment of discomfort. Now, let's dig deeper into something most of us overlook in our moments of pain: the quiet. Silence can feel heavy, can't it? Like it's pressing down on you, amplifying every doubt, every insecurity, every fear. But here's the twist. The very silence that feels unbearable is also where your greatest growth lies. It's not just a void. It's an open space, waiting for you to step into it and discover something extraordinary. I've learned that when life gets quiet, when people step back, or when the noise fades, that's when the real work begins. And trust me, what you uncover in that stillness can change everything. There's something almost sacred about the moments when no one else is around to influence you, when it's just you and your thoughts. At first, it can feel like loneliness, even rejection. But in truth, it's an invitation, a chance to reconnect with yourself in ways you never thought possible. I've found that silence isn't an enemy, it's a guide. When I stopped fearing it and started embracing it, my perspective shifted. It taught me lessons that no conversation, no validation, and no external approval ever could. Let me take you through this, step by step, so you can see silence for the gift it really is. Silence is where you get to know yourself in ways that everyday noise drowns out. When you're surrounded by distractions, by constant conversations, or the pull of social media, it's easy to lose touch with who you are. Your opinions get blurred with others, your needs get overshadowed, and your voice starts to fade in the crowd. But when everything quiets down, you're left with just yourself. That can be scary at first. I've had moments where sitting in silence felt like staring into an endless void. But over time, I realized that this void wasn't empty. It was full of answers, clarity, and understanding I hadn't given myself the time to see. The more I leaned into silence, the more I saw it as a mirror. It reflected back the parts of me I'd ignored, the dreams I'd buried, and even the fears I hadn't faced. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was always revealing. I found that silence gives you the chance to ask yourself the questions no one else will. What do you really want? What makes you happy, not them? What's been holding you back, and what are you afraid to admit to yourself? These aren't questions you can answer when you're caught up in the noise of daily life. But in silence, they come alive, and they demand your attention. One of the most profound things silence has taught me is the value of letting go. When there's no one around to fill the gaps, you start to see what you're holding on to out of fear, habit, or insecurity. For me, it was the need to always explain myself, to justify my choices to others, or to seek approval. In the stillness, I realized that I didn't need to carry that anymore. I could just be. That's the beauty of silence. It strips away everything unnecessary and leaves you with what's real. And what's real is enough. There's also an unexpected strength that comes from embracing silence. When you stop running from it, when you stop filling it with noise or distractions, you realize that you're stronger than you think. You don't need constant reassurance or a steady stream of validation to feel whole. You learn to trust yourself, your instincts, and your inner voice. That's something no one can take away from you. It's yours, built in the quiet moments when you chose to sit with yourself instead of running from the discomfort. Silence isn't just about reflection, though. It's also a powerful tool for creativity and problem solving. I've had some of my best ideas, not in the middle of a conversation, but in the calm, uninterrupted stretches of quiet. When your mind isn't busy reacting to the world around you, it has the freedom to wander, to explore, and to connect dots you didn't even know existed. I've learned that silence isn't a pause, it's an opportunity. It's the space where new possibilities are born. Another thing I've discovered is how silence can deepen your sense of gratitude. When the noise fades and the distractions fall away, you start to notice the small things you've been overlooking. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the way a deep breath feels after a long day, the sound of your own heartbeat reminding you that you're alive here and capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. These moments may seem small, but they're profound. They ground you in the present and remind you of what truly matters. Leaning into silence also changes the way you approach relationships. When you stop fearing the quiet, you stop needing constant interaction to feel secure. You start to value quality over quantity, depth over surface-level connection. I've found that the more comfortable I've become with my own company, the more meaningful my relationships have become. I no longer need others to fill a void. Instead, I can meet them from a place of wholeness and authenticity. But perhaps the most transformative part of embracing silence is how it shifts your mindset. When you stop running from it, you start to see it as a sanctuary rather than a punishment. It becomes a space where you can recharge, recalibrate, and reconnect with your purpose. I've learned to cherish those moments of quiet, not because they're easy, but because they're essential. They remind me that growth doesn't happen in the noise, it happens in the stillness. Silence isn't just something to endure, it's something to embrace, to celebrate, and to seek out. It's where you find clarity in confusion, strength in vulnerability, and peace in chaos. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of yourself. So, if you're facing silence right now, don't run from it. Step into it. Let it teach you, shape you, and guide you toward the person you're meant to become. Trust me, the growth waiting for you in that quiet space is worth every moment. When you embrace silence, you begin to see things clearly. The distractions fade, the noise dies down, and what's left is an undeniable truth. Much of the tension we feel in life comes from a desire for approval. It's an exhausting chase, isn't it? The need to be liked, to be accepted, to have others validate our worth. It can feel like a weight you're constantly carrying, one that grows heavier the more you seek external affirmation. But what if I told you that letting go of that need could set you free? That learning to validate yourself, to find strength within, is one of the most liberating shifts you'll ever experience. This isn't about cutting people off or pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming the power you've unknowingly handed over to others. I've been in that place where my mood hinged on someone else's approval, where a compliment could lift me up and the lack of one could tear me down. It's a fragile way to live, constantly tethered to the opinions of others. But here's the thing. You don't need anyone else to define your worth. The strength you're looking for is already within you. Let's dive into how you can detach from external validation and truly start living for yourself. One of the first steps is understanding where this need for validation comes from. For me, it was rooted in insecurity, this underlying fear of not being enough. I thought that if others approved of me, it meant I was doing okay. But the truth is, external validation is like a band-aid. It might cover up the wound for a while, but it doesn't heal the underlying issue. The real work starts when you ask yourself why you're seeking approval in the first place. Are you afraid of rejection? Do you tie your self-worth to how others see you? These are hard questions, but they're necessary. Because once you understand the why, you can start to untangle yourself from it. Shifting away from external validation means building an internal foundation of self-worth. This doesn't happen overnight, and it's not about becoming arrogant or shutting others out. It's about recognizing that your value isn't something that fluctuates based on someone else's opinion. One exercise that helped me was keeping a journal of my accomplishments, not for anyone else to see, but for me to reflect on. It's easy to forget your wins when you're focused on what others think. Writing them down reminded me of my own abilities and gave me a sense of pride that didn't depend on outside praise. Another powerful tool is practicing gratitude, but not in the way you might think. Instead of focusing on external things, like someone's compliment or approval, focus on qualities within yourself that you're grateful for. Maybe it's your resilience, your kindness, or your ability to learn from mistakes. When you start to see the good in yourself, you rely less on others to point it out. Letting go of external validation also means becoming comfortable with the idea that not everyone will like you. This was a tough pill for me to swallow. I used to bend over backward trying to please people, only to feel drained and unappreciated. But here's the truth. You could be the kindest, most generous person in the world, and someone still won't like you. And that's okay. What matters is that you're true to yourself. When you stop trying to be everything for everyone, you free up energy to focus on what truly matters, living authentically and building a life that aligns with your values. One of the most freeing realizations I had was that the opinions of others often have more to do with them than with me. People see the world through their own lens of experiences, insecurities, and biases. If someone criticizes you or withholds approval, it's often a reflection of their own struggles. When I started to understand this, I stopped taking things so personally. It's not that feedback doesn't matter. It does, especially when it's constructive. But there's a difference between listening to helpful input and hinging your self-worth on someone's opinion. Detaching from external validation also means learning to celebrate yourself in private. We live in a world where so much of our lives are shared publicly, from achievements to milestones. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeking likes, comments, or recognition to feel good about yourself. But there's something powerful about keeping some wins to yourself. It's a quiet kind of confidence, one that doesn't need an audience. When you can acknowledge your growth and successes without broadcasting them, you start to build a deeper, more personal sense of pride. Another shift that helped me was redefining success. For a long time, I measured success based on how others perceived me. But the Stoics teach us that true success isn't about external rewards. It's about living in alignment with your values. When I started focusing on what mattered to me rather than what I thought would impress others, I felt a sense of fulfillment I'd never experienced before. Success became less about ticking boxes and more about living a life I could be proud of, regardless of who noticed. Detaching from external validation doesn't mean isolating yourself or ignoring others completely. It's about striking a balance. Relationships are still important, and constructive feedback can help you grow. But there's a difference between valuing someone's perspective and needing their approval. When you detach, you give yourself the freedom to choose whose opinions matter and whose don't. Not everyone's voice deserves a place in your head. Learning to set those boundaries is one of the most empowering things you can do. One of the biggest challenges in this journey is dealing with criticism. When you're tied to external validation, criticism can feel like a personal attack. But when you detach, you start to see it differently. Criticism becomes information, something you can evaluate and decide whether to act on. Not all criticism is valid, and not all of it requires a response. When you're secure in yourself, you can take what's useful and let the rest go. Building internal strength also means being patient with yourself. There will be days when you crave validation, when someone's opinion stings more than it should. That's okay. Detaching isn't about never feeling affected. It's about learning to navigate those moments with grace. It's about reminding yourself that your worth isn't on the line, even when it feels like it is. Over time, those moments become fewer and farther between, and you start to feel a sense of freedom you never thought possible. By shifting your focus inward, you reclaim the power you've been giving away. You learn to trust yourself, to value your own voice, and to live a life that feels true to you. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Because at the end of the day, the only approval you truly need is your own. When you reach that point, you'll wonder why you ever looked outside yourself in the first place. And that's where true freedom begins. As we continue this journey, we now turn to something that can feel both painful and empowering: giving space. There's something about distance that can stir up uncertainty, whether it's a friend, a partner, or even family pulling away, leaving you to wonder if you've done something wrong. It's easy to feel like you're being abandoned, like your value is tied to how much attention or closeness others are giving you. I know this feeling well, and I've learned, through my own struggles, that giving space doesn't have to be a loss. In fact, it can be a powerful opportunity for growth, for both you and the person you care about. When someone needs space, it's natural to feel anxious or to wonder if it's because of something you did. I've been there, second-guessing my words, my actions, and questioning whether I was good enough. But here's what I've realized: giving space isn't about losing yourself in the process. It's about respecting their need for distance while holding on to your own sense of worth and stability. It's a balance that requires confidence in yourself, understanding of the other person's needs, and trust that space doesn't have to mean the end of the relationship. It can instead be a moment of necessary breathing room, a space that ultimately strengthens the bond you share. The first thing I had to learn was not to take it personally. When someone steps back or asks for distance, it's tempting to think it's a reflection of you, of your value, or of what you bring to the relationship. But I've learned that it's not about you, it's about their own need for space. People pull away for many reasons. They may be dealing with their own challenges, processing emotions, or simply in need of time to reflect. It's easy to assume the worst, but the truth is that their request for space is often more about their journey than anything you've done wrong. In my experience, I had to stop internalizing the silence. When I first started giving space to others, I was filled with doubt. I thought that by stepping back, I was somehow losing the connection or doing something wrong. But over time, I realized that giving space was actually a sign of respect. I wasn't forcing them to be something they weren't ready for. I was honoring their process. At the same time, I learned to honor my own need for self-preservation. It's about drawing the line between allowing the person space to grow and stepping away from a place of insecurity. The real challenge came when I realized that giving space to others doesn't mean sacrificing your own stability. In the past, I used to get lost in the absence of communication. When someone distanced themselves, I'd fill the void with overthinking, self-doubt, and a fear of being forgotten. It was like I was waiting for the moment they'd come back to me, but in doing so, I lost sight of myself. I stopped living my life and instead became fixated on someone else's decisions. But this pattern didn't serve me. It left me drained and disconnected from who I was. I eventually understood that while I could give others the space they needed, I had to ensure I wasn't giving up my own space, my own needs, desires, and goals. This was a turning point for me. I realized that just because someone needs distance, it doesn't mean you have to lose your momentum. You don't have to stop pursuing your passions, goals, or self-care. Instead of waiting for someone to re-enter your life, you can choose to thrive in their absence. It's in this space that you can reconnect with your own journey, rediscover your independence, and reaffirm your worth. Another lesson I had to learn was the importance of boundaries. Giving space isn't about being passive or disappearing completely. It's about respecting the other person's need for distance without losing yourself in the process. This is where clear boundaries come into play. I had to remind myself that I could give someone space while also maintaining my own emotional boundaries. I didn't have to chase or beg for attention. I simply had to allow things to unfold naturally. The key is recognizing that your happiness isn't tied to someone else's proximity or availability. It's about finding peace in the understanding that space doesn't diminish your value. It's a natural part of any relationship. It's also important to recognize that giving space doesn't mean you lose your voice. In fact, giving space can open up the opportunity for better communication when the time is right. I've learned that sometimes distance allows for clarity, both for you and the person who needs space. It gives you the chance to reflect on your own emotions, think about the relationship, and gain perspective. It also allows the other person to process their feelings without the pressure of constant interaction. When both parties return from that space, the conversation tends to be more grounded, more thoughtful, and more honest. However, during this time of space, I found that it's essential not to become passive in your own life. Don't wait in limbo or put your life on hold for someone else to catch up. I used to fall into this trap, believing that I had to wait for the other person's return to be happy or complete. But here's the truth I've learned. Your happiness, peace, and sense of self-worth can't be contingent on someone else's actions. It must come from within. Giving space is not about waiting. It's about allowing both parties to grow individually and come back to each other with a deeper, more genuine connection. I also realized that giving space can be a sign of maturity, of understanding, and of respect. It's about recognizing that everyone needs time to process and reflect. The art lies in understanding that just because someone needs space doesn't mean you're less important to them. Instead, you're creating the room for growth, both individually and as a relationship. In my experience, this shift in perspective can make all the difference. It allows you to step back from the emotional reaction of feeling rejected and instead see the opportunity for personal development. It's in these moments of space that I've learned the true meaning of self-worth. Giving space is a delicate balance, respecting the other person's needs while staying grounded in your own. But I've found that it's in this balance that true growth occurs. By maintaining your own sense of stability and independence, you allow the relationship to evolve into something healthier, more balanced, and more fulfilling. Instead of losing yourself in the absence, you grow stronger, more confident, and more secure in who you are, regardless of the distance. So, the next time someone pulls away or asks for space, don't panic. Don't make it mean something negative about you. Take it as an opportunity to focus on yourself, to deepen your own understanding, and to reinforce your sense of worth. Trust that the space will not only serve them, but will serve you as well, giving both of you the chance to come back stronger, more aware, and more connected. The beauty of giving space is that it teaches you that you can stand tall and whole, whether someone is close by or far away. When you give space without losing yourself, you begin to feel stronger, steadier, and more rooted in your own worth. But let's be honest, there's often pain in the process. Emotional pain has a way of creeping in, doesn't it? That heaviness in your chest, the questions swirling in your mind, the feeling of being unworthy or abandoned, it can be overwhelming. I've felt it too. But here's something that changed everything for me. Emotional pain isn't just something to endure, it's something you can transform. It's a chance to grow, to strengthen your inner resilience, and to emerge wiser and more grounded than ever before. I've come to see emotional pain as a teacher, though it didn't start that way. At first, I wanted to avoid it, to numb it, to push it aside. But every time I ignored the pain, it came back louder, demanding my attention. I realized that running from it didn't work. What worked was leaning into it, not in a way that consumed me, but in a way that allowed me to understand it. Pain, I discovered, has layers. On the surface, it might feel like rejection or loss, but underneath, it holds lessons about who you are, what you value, and how strong you truly are. One of the most important lessons I learned is that emotional pain doesn't define you. It's easy to let it take over, to let it shape the way you see yourself. When I felt ignored or distanced, I used to think, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Those thoughts were heavy, and they made the pain worse. But over time, I realized that the pain wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of my humanity. Pain is universal. Everyone feels it in some form. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you care deeply, and that's a strength, not a flaw. What shifted my perspective was adopting a Stoic mindset. The Stoics believed that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. That idea became my anchor. When I felt emotional pain, I started asking myself, what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? Instead of seeing pain as something to fear, I began to see it as an opportunity. It didn't mean the pain disappeared. It didn't. But it meant that it had a purpose, and having a purpose made it easier to bear. I also learned the importance of letting myself feel the pain without judgment. This was hard for me because I used to think that feeling pain meant I wasn't strong. But the truth is, strength isn't about avoiding emotions. It's about facing them with courage. When I allowed myself to sit with the pain, to feel it fully, something unexpected happened. the intensity began to fade. It was like shining a light on a shadow. The more I faced it, the less power it had over me. Another thing that helped was reframing the way I thought about pain. Instead of seeing it as something being done to me, I started seeing it as something happening for me. That might sound strange, but it's a subtle shift that makes a big difference. Pain became less about what someone else had caused and more about what I could gain from the experience. I asked myself questions like, what is this teaching me about my boundaries, my needs, my capacity to endure? These questions turned the pain into a tool for self-discovery. One of the hardest parts of dealing with emotional pain is the feeling of helplessness, but I learned that even in pain, I had choices. I could choose how to respond, how to think, and how to move forward. This realization gave me back a sense of control, even when things felt out of my hands. For example, when someone ignored me or distanced themselves, I couldn't control their actions, but I could control how I interpreted them. Instead of thinking, they don't care about me, I chose to think, they're dealing with something I can't see. This shift in perspective didn't erase the pain, but it softened it. I also started seeing pain as a kind of emotional workout. Just like your muscles grow stronger after being challenged, your emotional resilience grows stronger after facing pain. Every time I worked through a difficult emotion, I felt a little more capable, a little more steady. It wasn't about becoming invincible, it was about becoming adaptable. Pain taught me that I could survive hard things and come out the other side more grounded than before. Leaning on Stoic practices like journaling helped me process my emotions in a way that felt constructive. Writing down my thoughts gave me clarity. It allowed me to step back and see the bigger picture instead of getting lost in the moment. I'd write about what I was feeling, why I thought I was feeling it, and what I could learn from it. Sometimes just putting the pain into words made it feel more manageable. It turned something overwhelming into something tangible, something I could work through. Another thing I learned was the importance of self-compassion. When you're in pain, it's easy to be hard on yourself, to think you should be stronger, or that you shouldn't feel this way. But I realized that the kinder I was to myself, the easier it was to navigate the pain. I started treating myself like I would a friend, offering understanding instead of criticism, patience instead of judgment. This shift helped me build a stronger relationship with myself, one based on care and respect. I came to see that emotional pain isn't permanent. In the moment, it can feel endless, like it will never get better. But it does. Pain ebbs and flows, and over time, it fades. What stays with you isn't the pain itself, but the lessons it taught you. For me, those lessons were invaluable. They taught me how to set boundaries, how to trust myself, and how to find strength in vulnerability. They showed me that I could endure more than I thought, and that even in the hardest moments, there was growth happening beneath the surface. Pain is never easy, and it's never something we choose. But when it comes, you have a choice. You can let it consume you, or you can let it shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The path isn't easy, but it's worth it, because every time you face your pain head-on, you're proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you ever thought possible. And that's a lesson you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. When you turn emotional pain into resilience, something profound begins to shift inside you. The pain no longer controls you, and you start to see the world and your relationships through a clearer lens. But here's where things can get tricky. Relationships, as meaningful as they are, can also become sources of attachment, dependency, and imbalance. I've been there. I've clung to relationships out of fear of being alone, ignored red flags because I didn't want to lose someone, and even tied my self-worth to how others treated me. It's a slippery slope. one that leaves you drained and disconnected from your own power. But what if relationships didn't have to be like that? What if they could be rooted in mutual growth, authenticity, and shared values instead of fear or neediness? This is where Stoic philosophy changed everything for me. It taught me to redefine relationships, not as something to cling to, but as opportunities for growth and connection without losing myself. This shift wasn't easy, but it was life-changing. Let's explore how embracing a Stoic approach can transform the way you value and nurture the connections in your life. The first thing I had to unlearn was the idea that relationships are about filling a void. So many of us enter relationships, whether romantic, friendships, or even family dynamics, because we're looking for someone to complete us, to make us feel whole. I used to think that if I found the right person or built the perfect connection, everything else in my life would fall into place. But the truth is, no relationship can fix what's broken inside you. That's work only you can do. When I stopped expecting others to fill the gaps in my life, I started seeing relationships for what they really are. Partnerships where two whole individuals come together to share, support, and grow. Stoic philosophy emphasizes the idea of interdependence over dependency. There's a subtle but powerful difference between the two. Dependency is when you need someone to validate you, to constantly reassure you, or to make you feel secure. Interdependence, on the other hand, is about supporting each other while maintaining your own independence. It's about being strong on your own and choosing to share that strength with someone else. I learned that when you approach relationships from a place of interdependence, they become healthier, more balanced, and far more fulfilling. One of the most valuable lessons Stoicism taught me was the importance of aligning relationships with your values. In the past, I held on to relationships that didn't serve me, simply because I didn't want to let go. I thought loyalty meant staying no matter what, even if the connection was draining me or pulling me away from my own path. But Stoicism taught me that true loyalty starts with loyalty to yourself and your principles. When you prioritize relationships that reflect your values, kindness, honesty, respect, you naturally attract connections that uplift you instead of weigh you down. Another transformative shift was learning to let go of attachment to outcomes. This was hard for me because I used to think that relationships had to look a certain way or last forever to be meaningful. But the Stoics remind us that nothing in life is permanent, not even the people we love. At first, this idea felt unsettling, but over time I found freedom in it. When you let go of the need to control the outcome of a relationship, you're able to fully appreciate it for what it is in the present moment. You stop worrying about whether it will last and start focusing on whether it's meaningful now. I also had to confront the role of ego in relationships. Often, we hold on to connections not because they're good for us, but because our ego tells us we can't lose. I've stayed in situations where I felt unappreciated, just because walking away felt like admitting defeat. But Stoicism taught me that true strength isn't about winning or losing. It's about living in alignment with what's right for you. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is step back from a relationship that no longer serves you, even if your ego wants you to fight for it. Another profound realization was the power of acceptance. In relationships, we often try to change people, to mold them into what we want them to be. I used to think that if I could just get someone to see things my way or act differently, the relationship would be perfect. But this only led to frustration and disappointment. Stoicism taught me that you can't control other people. You can only control how you respond to them. When I started accepting people for who they were, rather than who I wanted them to be, my relationships became more authentic. I stopped trying to fix or change others, and instead focused on showing up as my best self. This doesn't mean tolerating bad behavior or lowering your standards. In fact, One of the most empowering lessons I've learned is the importance of setting boundaries. Relationships thrive when there's mutual respect, and boundaries are a big part of that. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about creating a space where both you and the other person can feel safe, respected, and valued. When I started setting clear boundaries in my relationships, I noticed a dramatic shift. The people who truly cared about me respected those boundaries, and the ones who didn't naturally faded away. It was a tough but necessary filter. Stoicism also taught me the value of gratitude in relationships. It's easy to focus on what's missing or what you wish were different, but when you practice gratitude, you start to see the beauty in the small, everyday moments. I began to appreciate the people in my life not for what they could do for me, but simply for who they were. This shift made my connections feel richer, more genuine, and less transactional. Gratitude helped me let go of resentment and focus on the positive aspects of my relationships, even when they weren't perfect. One of the hardest lessons I've had to embrace is the idea that not all relationships are meant to last. The Stoics remind us that everything in life is temporary, and this includes the people we love. While this can be a painful truth, it's also a liberating one. When you accept that relationships have seasons, you're able to cherish them while they last and let go when the time comes. Instead of clinging to what was, you can celebrate what the relationship gave you, whether it was joy, growth, or even a hard but necessary lesson. Finally, Stoicism has taught me that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. When you nurture your own well-being, stay true to your values, and find contentment within, every other relationship becomes an extension of that inner peace. You no longer approach connections from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. You're able to give freely, love authentically, and let go gracefully when necessary. This is the kind of freedom Stoicism offers, a way to engage deeply with others without losing yourself in the process. Redefining relationships through the lens of Stoicism has been one of the most transformative journeys of my life. It's taught me to value authenticity over attachment, mutual growth over dependency, and acceptance over control. Relationships at their best are opportunities to connect, grow, and share life's journey with others. But they are never the source of your worth. That comes from within. And when you understand this, every connection you have becomes richer, more meaningful, and truly free. So here we are, at the end of this journey. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this. Being ignored or distanced isn't the end of your story. It's an opportunity. Whether it's leaning into silence to rediscover yourself, detaching from the need for others' approval, giving space without losing your sense of worth, turning emotional pain into resilience, or redefining relationships to reflect your values, every step you take is a step toward becoming stronger, more grounded, and deeply self-aware. I've shared these lessons not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who's walked this path, stumbled, and found meaning in the process. Trust me when I say, you have everything you need within you to rise above the noise, the doubts, and the pain. You don't need someone else to validate your worth. You already have it. And when you embrace that truth, nothing and no one can shake your foundation. Now I want to hear from you. What resonated with you the most? Which of these steps feels the most powerful or challenging for you? Leave a comment below. I read every single one, and your experiences matter. Let's start a conversation, because we're all in this together, learning and growing as we go. And if this video gave you value, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join our community. We're building a space for real growth, honest conversations, and life-changing wisdom rooted in timeless philosophy. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, remember, you are stronger than you know, and the best version of you is just on the other side of this journey. Let's keep going, together.